Hello everyone, welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for joining me for another live stream. Thank you to all of our members, subscribers and viewers and regular viewers as well. Let's give ourselves a minute to make sure everything's up and live and running before we go ahead with our live stream for tonight. We have a lot to talk about tonight, lots of updates, lots of things happening. And I posted a couple of videos as well earlier on. And I have another video coming up with some important developments as well. Okay, still can't see myself yet. Let's have a look. And looks like we're up and running. Okay, lovely. Cool. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for waiting, and apologies for the slight delay. We had to reschedule because I had another video because there were lots of things to talk about today. Lots of resignations, not just one resignation. Lots of activities and new surprises from the resistance, and interesting statements from one of the Israelis who was rescued yesterday during the genocide of Nuseirat. Infanticide, not just genocide. These people deliberately murder children. They deliberately murder children. It's an infanticide state, a child murdering country like the UN has labeled them now. So, Benny Gantz, he's resigning. What's going to happen? Is someone else going to go in? Is Netanyahu going to collapse? All of that, I'm sure many people have many questions. First and foremost, Benny Gantz gave Benjamin Netanyahu a deadline, which was yesterday. After this genocide, yesterday, he delayed it. He delayed it and he resigned today. He resigned with Gantz and Eisenkot, another one called Trooper, who entered the war cabinet on the 11th of October. All of them belong to the same party that Benny Gantz lead, and Benny Gantz and Gantz and Eisenkot both were previous chiefs of staff in the Israeli army. It was very important for Benjamin Netanyahu to have these figures in the war cabinet. They came simultaneously with another resignation that looked like it was coordinated with the head of the Gaza division, Avi Rosenfeld. The head of the Gaza division, the commander of the Gaza division, is a very, very important commander. The Gaza division, right? The division surrounding Gaza, ensuring everything is protected, secure with Gaza, same division that was humiliated on the 7th of October, that Hamas kidnapped many of its soldiers, and they obviously targeted a lot of them in under an hour. Approximately 18 bases surrounding Israel. He resigned as well. Okay. And there's a pattern. We had resignations from Fox, commander in the West Bank. We had a resignation from the team of the IDF spokesperson. We had the resignation from an official, a top figure in the Israeli Military Intelligence Directorate. Resignations. And the IDF spokesperson's whole team resigned. So the military establishment, partially also with the intelligence establishment, are taking a step back from Benjamin Netanyahu. This is very dangerous. Why are they doing that? They're doing that primarily because Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't listening to them, by the way, and wasn't respecting them and their position. And he was completely careless about the fact that these people know better than him when it comes to war and when it comes to decisions. He previously prevented people from the cabinet from contacting the head of the Mossad, prevented the head of the Mossad from going to Qatar for the delegation to negotiate. He had his feud, obviously, with Yoav Gallant, who's still with him, by the way, and I'll get to what Benny Gantz is asking him to do. So he's not respecting these establishments. And he even said before, he said to the negotiating delegation led by the head of the Israeli Mossad that you don't know how to negotiate with Hamas. I know how to negotiate. You don't know them, I know them. So he's very condescending, very patronizing when it comes to top figures in Israel. And traditionally, Israeli prime ministers, they had some sort of respect for people in these positions, even if their decisions and their views on the war, which is something very, very sensitive. Obviously, each person has heightened tensions and emotions when it comes to wars and what they want to do and what they believe is right. And it's easy to start calling people this and that. He was careless about them. So what did Benny Gantz say exactly? Well, he said a couple of things, and also Gantz and Eisenkot said a couple of things. Gantz, in his speech, he said, "We formed an emergency government out of partnership of fate, not out of political partnership. Months after the October disaster, the situation in the country and the decision-making room changed. Netanyahu and his partners turned unity into an excited call without a cover in reality. Fatal strategic decisions encountering hesitation and procrastination due to political considerations. Honestly, entering the government was a simple decision. To leave when we were kidnapped in the Hamas tunnels, when the residents of the north are far from their homes, and thousands of fighters are on the front, this is a complex and agonizing decision. Both decisions have one common denominator, the good of the state of Israel. We try to influence the direction of the ship in the closed rooms. The truth is, the reality is not simple. The campaign will take years. I will not guarantee you an easy and quick victory. You deserve more than empty promises." He also added, "The state of Israel needs and can achieve real victory. A real victory put the return of the abductees home above survival in power. A real victory is a victory that combines military success with political and civil initiative. A real victory will lead to the collapse of Hamas and its replacement. A real victory is to bring the residents of the north to home safely. A real victory is to establish a regional alliance against Iran under the leadership of the US and together with the entire Western world. A real victory is to change the national priorities, to expand the circle of service and servants, and to make sure that Israel is able to face the challenges facing it, and not to bring to the plenary tomorrow a law that harms the security of the state during a war because of a political debt." He was later attacked. He attacked, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he called for elections. Said, "Unfortunately, Netanyahu is preventing us from progressing to real victory. Netanyahu is preventing us from going to a real victory, which is the justification for the painful and ongoing price. Therefore, we are leaving the emergency government today with a heavy heart, but with a whole heart. We are standing up today for the campaign on the fate of the state of Israel for generations to come. It is appropriate that in the fall, a government will be formed that will win the trust of the people. I call on Netanyahu, do not let our people be torn apart." He also called for an establishment of a state inquiry, commissioning of an inquiry that will examine the failures at home and protect us against the hypocritical attacks from the outside, as he labels them. I call on the leaders of the parties and all the forces in the public arena, on the right and on the left, religious and secular, to unite behind me in this campaign. We all need to act as one man for elections, and at the end, which we will establish a unity government, Zionist, national, and state, a true unity government. And then he tried to push Yoav Gallant, who is obviously still a member of the Likud party. He said, Yoav, we have known each other for many years, even when there were tensions between us. I always respected and valued you. In this war, I learned to appreciate you even more. You are a brave and determined leader, and above all, a patriot. At this time, leadership and courage are not only saying what is right, but also doing what is right. He's sending a message to Yoav Gallant to resign, which will put even more pressure on Netanyahu. And I will get to Netanyahu's options, by the way, because he can still manage the war and he can still remain in power only with him and Gallant, or with him including someone else. I'll get to that in a second. Gantz and Eisenkot, his partner, who was also the chief of staff of the IDF, he also said, despite my multiple efforts, along with those of my colleagues, the cabinet headed by you has for a long time avoided making decisive decisions which are required for the realization of the goals of the war and the improvement of the strategic situation of the state of Israel. This avoidance actually harms the strategic situation and the national security of the state of Israel. That was Gantz Eisenkot. Okay, what's going to happen now? Here's what's going to happen, or here are the options that can happen. Obviously, Benjamin Netanyahu called on him, no, don't leave. This is a situation of unity. Don't do this now. This is a situation of war, trying to convince him to stay. That's clearly not going to work because he made his decision and he gave Netanyahu an ultimatum. Clearly, Netanyahu did not listen, and he had Gantz Eisenkot leaving with him as well, alongside Trooper, and now the Gaza division commander too. But he still has Yoav Gallant with him. What are his options? Obviously, the war cabinet was established to run the war. They didn't need to do that, by the way. He could have managed the war on his own, but Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't have the experience in running a war. He served, but he didn't lead the army. He didn't have very top key positions in the army. He doesn't have decades of experience like Gantz and Gallant and others as well. So that's why he had them in. What are his options? Continue with a smaller war cabinet. A smaller war cabinet led by him and Yoav Gallant that will expand the decision-making also to the extended cabinet. Not just the war cabinet, the extended cabinet consisting of other people from the Israeli government who have less of a say when it comes to the decisions. He is being asked by Itamar Ben-Gvir, let me in. Itamar Ben-Gvir wants to go in. Now, he wants to be part of that. Netanyahu doesn't want him in. Because so far, this guy caused a lot of headache for Netanyahu. Last thing he wants is for him to have a fight and has to see him and speak with him on a more regular basis, already blanking him as part of his government. He doesn't want to have to deal with him on a daily basis. But that's an option, him and Smotrich, because they already have these security positions, by the way, although they lack any substantial experience. As a matter of fact, Ben-Gvir himself, he didn't serve in the Israeli army, and he was a convicted terrorist in Israel. Imagine how far you need to go to be labeled as a person who is a Jewish Israeli, a terrorist in Israel. That's Itamar Ben-Gvir. What are the other options? The other options are for Benjamin Netanyahu to ask someone with a previous experience in the security establishment, or someone who he was previously allied with to have some sort of more of a justification to join him, like Avigdor Lieberman, who we reported that was offered the position of the defense minister previously. There were reports in Israel that he offered him, Benjamin Netanyahu offered Lieberman the position of defense minister. He was previously defense minister. He was also previously deputy prime minister. And he was previously an ally of Netanyahu. And he had a unity party with him at one point. But then they split and he became a harsh critic of Benjamin Netanyahu. Primarily because of his alliance with the religious movements in Israel. And he has an option to bring a man called Gideon Saar, who was also part of his party and then resigned and formed another party, to have more of an acceptable coalition, because so far it looks like it's only Netanyahu and the far, far right radical maniacs leading the country. What if he goes ahead with Yoav Gallant, and what is the short-term impact of Benny Gantz leaving? Well, Benny Gantz leaving is going to give a massive backing to the protests. Benny Gantz leaving the government and his party, which is a significant party, and Gantz and Eisenkot, who were previous chiefs of the IDF, it will give a large backing to the protests in the streets of Israel. Will the government listen even if the protests escalate? Not guaranteed, because so far we've seen lots of protests in Israel and the government wasn't listening. You had the families of the people who were kidnapped telling you, stop the war, bring them back, have a deal with Hamas. Hamas already told you, we accepted the deal. And the negotiating delegation previously said, we accepted the deal, it's acceptable. And then Netanyahu rejected, and he always comes up with these new ridiculous terms and obstacles for the negotiating delegation. And they even complain about him, the negotiating delegation, that we receive orders in the morning and then they become different during the day, and then we're ordered something else in the night. Very, very intense frustration. That's evident, and that's published, and the people in the Israeli streets, they know that. But what if they have more backing from people like Benny Gantz and Gantz and Eisenkot? That could put more strain on the country. They could start taking more actions to shut down parts of the country. Not that they don't, they do in certain locations now, but this could obviously give an intense backing, especially if at some point Gallant resigns, by the way, but so far we're not seeing Gallant resigning. All right. Even if he brings people from other parts like Lebanon, for example, or Syria, there will still be likelihood of protests continuing. But again, it's not guaranteed that Benjamin Netanyahu will stop the war, and he will continue running the war cabinet, and he will continue ordering the IDF. However, what is going to be the impact on the war itself and how things are carried out? It's going to become worse for Israel as a whole. It's going to be less effective. They will be making more mistakes that could potentially be fatal at a higher rate. Why? Because if he had these people from the military establishment advising him, with him in the war cabinet, people with a very rich experience in the army, and he wasn't listening to them because he thought he knows better. And now he's going to run it on his own, so he's not going to even have advice from these people. Who are we left with? The pressure of Itamar Ben-Gvir. That pressure used to be slightly filtered by figures like Gantz and Eisenkot, and Gallant even to an extent. And don't get me wrong here, everyone is genocidal. All of these people who I mentioned, by the way, but there's a difference in how they view the war and how to conduct the genocide. They might start making more fatal mistakes. Now, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, they're saying, burn the West Bank. We want the West Bank to become like Gaza. They're calling for a genocide in the West Bank. We want Lebanon to burn. These people are pushing for greater destruction and greater genocides in the West Bank, in Lebanon. And who's there to filter them? No one. Especially if Netanyahu agrees to bring someone like Ben-Gvir to the war cabinet. There's an option that he could do that. But even if he doesn't, well, what's the filter now between you and him? Yoav Gallant is a member of your party. You call the shots in your party. You're leading everything. And you're ordering who? The military. The next step is the IDF chief to resign, by the way. And don't be surprised if that happens, because the resignation of the commander of the Gaza division today alongside Gantz and Eisenkot is a massive blow. It's the army telling you, I do not trust you. I don't want to follow your orders. Now, that's evident from the people on the ground, people fleeing the war, people refusing to serve, refusing to be redeployed, hundreds, if not thousands, of parents sending letters to the country. We don't want our children to go to this war again. Frustration and disappointment from the actual troops because they're going back to the same places and getting further resistance. And the only thing they can do is conduct this abhorrent, barbaric genocide, infanticide, killing children deliberately, innocent, over 240 people to rescue 4 Israelis. What kind of depravity, what kind of barbarism, what kind of genocide are we talking about here? Talking about next level stuff, supported by who? The UK and the US, supporting them with intel, supporting them with resources. Using what? Using the aid pier. Now we know why they have an aid pier. It's not for the people of Gaza, is it? We knew it from the beginning. You don't care about these people. Don't act like you care about them. And now having this pier, you have a culprit. You have an address to the criminal, and it's the government of Israel. They are the ones conducting this genocide. Go ahead and stop them. But everything is becoming evident. So Netanyahu still is there. If we have a resignation from someone like Yoav Gallant, then it will be even more intense. Now it's already very, very intense, by the way. If Gallant resigns, or if the head of the IDF, the chief of staff, Halevi, resigns, that'll be a catastrophe. And you might see more violence. We're seeing signs of civil war. We're seeing conflict in the army. We're seeing conflict in the Israeli society. We're seeing conflict between the politicians. That could only escalate it even further. And the most dangerous thing is that this man, Benjamin Netanyahu, now could make decisions that are worse than the decisions he has already made in going to this genocide, the ground invasion, and all of that they've done so far in Gaza. And I'll open up the space for all of you now for your participation. If you mind highlighting your comments just so I can address them properly. And apologies in advance because I won't be able to address all of the comments, but obviously highlight your comments or questions, and then I'll do my best to reach all of them. But before we go there, I would like to thank Daniela and Wendy and Faraz and Conscious Hour for your super thanks. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. Wendy is saying, I hope journalists grill the State Department and shame them into changing course. These people are shameless. These people in power are depraved people who are nothing but tools. Now, they are even if they're tools, they're still the ones who are responsible. They are our address for people who are responsible, regardless of who's behind them, obviously, because these are the people who make the decisions. But yes, any pressure should be applied on them, whether it's protesting or being grilled by journalists. And sometimes they are taken aback when you have inquiries or press conferences. But it is very, very important. And Conscious Hour saying they are all jumping ship because Bibi won't quit. Bibi won't quit. Bibi, look, the fact that Bibi won't quit led Israel to 6 elections in 7 years, taking so much resources from the country, making it even more toxic because it included more bigoted campaigns in Israel. And Lord knows this is the most toxic nation on earth. And that costs billions, okay? So, but this man, despite the fact that so many people said, we'll form a government, even with your party, but we don't want you because you have criminal charges. He doesn't care about any of that. He'll lead the country to chaos after chaos. Now, any responsible prime minister, for example, you have a very tiny coalition. This coalition fails, someone resigns. You've done it once, you've done it twice, you've done it 3 times. Okay, 1, 2, enough. No, for Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, one might argue the first time is enough if people generally have integrity, genuinely have integrity in their position. This man lacks any of that, obviously, and the only thing he sees is his personal ambitions, his personal goals, whatever he wants and needs. Benjamin Netanyahu, no one else. And the state of Israel can burn, the people can burn, you can damage your economy, you can damage your security, you can damage your international relations, you can damage your country's image. Hell, you can burn your country to death. This is what he's doing. He's burning Israel to death. Now, what Israel's doing now is irreparable. It's irreparable. Their genocide is evident. Anyone who's not seeing a genocide is a blind, depraved individual or completely ignorant. And everyone's seeing what's happening. All you need to do is go on some social media platforms and see the images that were only from yesterday. You don't have to go further back, by the way. But if you go further back, you'll even have more reason, right? So he's done all of that. Benjamin Netanyahu, by him insisting on this genocide and this level of depravity and barbarism and you name it. And there's a limit. There's a limit to some people, obviously, and how far they're willing to stick with him. Amanda, where do you see this ending? This will end with the end of the supremacist regime in Israel, the end of apartheid, the dismantling of the violent ideology of Zionism, because Zionism is incompatible with humanity. Zionism is a vicious, violent, supremacist ideology that formed itself on the blood and displacement and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people, on robbery, on squatting, on a pseudo-history, on a pseudo-narrative. That needs to be dismantled and gone. And then everyone in the land of Palestine can live freely and equally under a one democratic state, Jews, Christians, Muslims, believers, non-believers, equal in front of the law with equal rights. This regime of supremacy must end. It's not consistent with humanity. It goes against human nature. Every fascist ideology failed. If they have even remote or temporary success, it's all temporary. It doesn't work. It does not work. But with Israel, you have its enablers. The Western powers who constantly boast on about democracy and human rights and equality. Yet when you have a country that admits it's a Zionist, Jewish supremacist state that occupies people on brutality and murder and genocide, they accept them and they declare that they are Zionists too. So your leaders in government proudly state that they are Zionists. Right? What's the difference between you claiming you follow the ideology of Zionism and you following the ideology of ISIS? What's the difference? Same thing. Terrorism at all levels, genocide. What? Israel killed more children in the past 4 years than all of the global conflicts combined in the past 4 years. More than Russia, Congo, wherever you go. And it's backed by Western powers supporting Israel with weapons, with legitimacy, with vetoes, with justification, with brainwashing and propaganda through mainstream media, far worse than the Israeli one, by the way, because in Israel you still have a level of criticism. Yet these people, these pseudo-intellectuals and these depraved people sitting there in mainstream media, knowing the truth, still cover up. Knowing the truth. All of them knew the truth. Every single mainstream media outlet knew the truth from the beginning, by the way. Why? Because they were tagged in posts on social media and they have people shared everything with them, quoted them, look, please, look what's happening in Gaza. But they ignore it. Why? Because they serve this supremacist, toxic ideology of Zionism that believes that certain people are above other people. This is what's happening. And that must end. Sooner or later, it's ending. It's incompatible with humanity. Will it end people having these ideologies? No, it won't. People will continue to have these twisted ideologies. People will continue to be racists. People will continue to be immoral. Some of them, obviously. But there's a difference between people having these types of ideologies, and then you can have, obviously, re-education, right? Removing the brainwashing, the propaganda, everything, de-radicalizing, right? Then they'll be protected. The people will be protected by the law, even if someone has a problem. But you need to have solid laws that protect people regardless of their background, and solid laws that criminalize this enticement for hate and discrimination against people. In Israel, it's systematic. It's institutionalized. Like the racism, the apartheid, all of that is institutionalized. And you don't get rid of it unless you dismantle it. So it needs to be dismantled. It's as simple as that. In the meantime, you might see temporary deals here, temporary deals there, ups and downs, escalations, de-escalations, but the end result will be the dismantling of Zionism as an ideology that controls a country. In that case, Palestine. And that was from Amanda. Tashikoma is saying what's happening with the ceasefire deal. Well, like I said, now U.S. representatives are coming to try and push Hamas again to agree to it. Well, what's the deal? Still having loopholes. You haven't pushed for anything solid. Hamas told you, we want what's good for the Palestinian people. We're concerned about the security of the Palestinian people. What they're requesting is very basic and very straightforward. Ending the genocide, getting the child murderers out of Gaza, allowing all aid in, letting people go back freely to any of their homes without any risk or intimidation, and then allowing everything to get in to rebuild Gaza with the temporary housing and what have you. And then obviously having the exchange in terms of prison. What's so unrealistic about that? Yet again, the people who are backing Israel believe that they are entitled to say things that the Palestinians are not entitled to. For example, Israel has a right to defend itself, a right that it doesn't, by the way. As a military occupation, you don't have a right to defend yourself. You have an obligation to protect the people you're occupying and giving them their rights. That's what the right you have. Whereas the resistance of the oppressed and occupied, they have the right to defend themselves. And no power and no propagandist on earth will convince us otherwise. The Palestinian resistance is the most just resistance on earth now. They have a full right internationally, international law, human law, divine law, you name it, nature's law, to resist up until they get this depraved, barbaric occupation off their chests. And they will succeed. Maybe Lynn is saying Yemeni media citing a security source, a major unprecedented strategic security achievement will be announced tomorrow, Monday. Any thoughts? Well, it could be linked to either the Eisenhower or the UK destroyer, unless they have something that they did not declare so far. And that wouldn't be surprising because they obviously have the necessary tools to target and to escalate. So far, they took it by stages and they were successful and they were honest with these stages. Every time they said we're going to have an escalation, we're going to have a surprise, they had a surprise. So if that's true, I haven't heard it, by the way, and they're telling me they're going to announce something tomorrow, I'll believe them because so far everything they said was true. Unlike the liars on the other side. Okay, saying, can you talk about the event that took place? Did they exit with the fat, well-fed prisoner of war through the pier? Well, what we saw from the pier was an Apache helicopter from the pier. There were reports of the aid truck in the pier, an A truck that they disguised themselves in, going to conduct this operation. When they went into Gaza, they were disguised as follows. They pretended to be Gazans fleeing from Rafah and coming to Nuseirat, and they were speaking with people. They had women and men, and they held with them the official things that the same things that the Palestinians who are fleeing and seeking refuge hold, like mattresses, clothes, the car is old, all of these things. And that car came through the Netzarim line, not through the pier, according to certain reports. Other reports said that they saw a similar vehicle on the pier, but the pier is further up and it doesn't make sense for the truck to travel that far. It would be way too risky for them. And it makes more sense for them to be there from the Netzarim line, which is the central part of Gaza that Israel controls part of, on the central part, the eastern part, and the western part towards the coast. So they went in, and then when they went to a building, they said, we are renting a place here. Clearly that was the same building that the prisoners of war were held in. And mind you, they weren't exactly in the same place, by the way. They were distributed in different rooms. Then Israel started with the massacre. So they had over 20 quadcopters going into the central part of Rafah, just killing people for no reason as a cover-up. This was their cover-up. Quadcopters shooting people in the market. Fighter jets landing 200 kg bombs on buildings, right? Tank shells on people, helicopters shooting. I saw an image of six babies under the age of 3 together in the hospital. Men landing on the streets, maimed, chopped, butchered bodies. Horror, beyond horror. Beyond horror. Anyone who supports this and anyone who's silent about this is just as evil and as depraved, the lowest scum of humanity these people are. Anyone who supports this and covers this up, the lowest low of humanity. You have child murdering people, killing, barbaric massacre to cover up an act to go and take out 4 Israelis. 4 Israelis. Killing 3 Israelis in the process. They killed 3, right? 2 Israelis, 1 American. And one of them was killed. One of the special forces that was killed, his family, they called the government, they told them, I don't want you in my son's funeral. And this man has been in the army for so long, he's called the country, so I don't want to see any official in his funeral, they said. Shows you how much they despise the government and they have so much hate between each other. So they did that, and then they started releasing this propaganda in Israel. Oh, one of the people who were held was in an Al Jazeera journalist's house. Oh my. And then they went and killed the man, killed his daughter, 27-year-old, in front of the children, killed another 36-year-old woman, right? These special forces, these heroic garbage scum of humanity, they're not even part of humanity, murdering all of these people to rescue these, for the sake of what? For the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu. For the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu getting some credit and trying to save himself again, and he's even failing with that. And they're being supported by who? By the United States, by the United Kingdom, by EU states. These are the people who are supporting them and still covering up their genocide. And obviously, what are they achieving in the grand scheme of things, apart from killing the people and causing more destruction? Obviously, it's bloodlust. They love seeing innocent people killed. They love it. You need to understand the mentality. Settlers show images of slaughtered children and celebrate. In case you don't know, you talk about next level people, enabled and empowered by Western countries and establishments. You need to understand that very well. The level of sickness and psychopathy that exists in Israel, enabled by the state of Israel and its backers, and everyone who's silent about them, by the way, from the Arab states surrounding them. These are people you're dealing with. In the grand scheme of things, what are they doing? The resistance is continuing. The people are continuing. But people, what? We suffered. And anyone who passed, Jannah, alhamdulillah, going to heaven. And they have to continue, obviously. What are they going to do? What other options do they have? They have no other option. And what is Israel doing? Again, if anyone has any doubt, go ahead, we'll prove it again. No, we'll show it again. But obviously still wouldn't see it on mainstream media. It's not like plaster. No, they'll hail the heroic act. The heroic act of massacring 240 people. What kind of depravity are we surrounded by? What kind of people? Are these people or what? Well, what are they exactly? People who don't view the lives of the Palestinian people as anything and cover up at any cost. But now at least you have social media. We can post how you struggle here, you try there, you pivot, you do stuff. And Mariam Kabir in Conscious Hour, thank you. And Gulnara and Vivette and Manuel and Faraz, thank you so much for your super thanks. I really appreciate them. Conscious Hour saying they're all jumping. Yes, we read that. Conscious Hour was also saying December 12th received call high up IDF and said stop Bibi. I'm not entirely sure that I get that, but if you wouldn't mind elaborating on that. And Gulnara, thank you so much for your super thanks. Vivette is saying, hi Mahmoud, hope you're well. Thanks for all that you do. Pleasure. Do you think Israel had spies in Nuseirat camp helping them? And also, how will this change the resistance stance going forward? They probably did, but they also have other types of intel. They clearly have something. And you obviously will see, and again, that's something that proves how stupid these people are. And that's why the Israeli army haven't proved previous attempts. And then when they stupidly proved this, this will risk all of the other Israelis, by the way. They will not be in the same conditions they were in. Harsher measures will be taken against them to protect them from this barbarism, and obviously to protect the Palestinian people, because now the resistance knows that the cost of Israel finding out a certain location is there. I'm not going to show them anything. Not that Israel is waiting for an excuse to massacre people. They don't need an excuse. They were raised and nurtured on the values of supremacy and genocide and barbarism. They are barbaric psychopaths. So that's not going to change with them, unless they obviously are met with the same medicine, right? And slowly but surely, you're seeing that, right? We're having a new equation happening, although you're talking about paramilitary groups, by the way, battled against from the biggest superpowers in the world. Yet they're still surviving with their belief, with their faith, with their just and noble cause. That's what's going to happen. I don't think Israel is likely to, because this operation they've been preparing for 8 months, they said. Well, 8 months to release these 4 and kill 3. Firstly, what kind of a stupid trade is that? Number one, you already killed over 100. Now you're all reaching 110. Secondly, in the supposed process to rescue the hostages, as they call it, you're killing thousands of troops, 30,000 disabled, hundreds of thousands wounded. What kind of a trade is that? When you already saw before, when Hamas told you from day one, we're willing to start negotiating now. When you saw from the temporary ceasefire, after you fulfilled some of your initial bloodlust by slaughtering 16,000 innocent people with 1-ton bombs, you satisfied some of that bloodlust and sickness in your depraved souls. You've done that. But then they still haven't realized that you can get these people without fighting, and you actually will get more Israelis without fighting. But clearly, no, they have other plans. They're a genocidal state. They need to continue the genocide. careless of anyone. They use their own people as cannon fodder. Do you think they care about their own troops? They killed IDF troops in tunnels. In the Jabalia attack that they had to take down one Al-Qassam member that was surrounded by 3 Israeli troops at the time, knowingly, they gas bombed it. How ironic is that? Like Auschwitz. And his mother knew, because they had post-mortem and all of that, and the IDF said, and she tried to make a fuss. I spoke about it at the time. If you look at my video from about 5 months ago, the thumbnail says IDF Auschwitz, something like that, with a picture of the soldier in a tunnel. And I talk about what the mother stated at the time, the criticism and the funeral, and she wrote statements on his grave, and the Israeli woman, and then the Israeli Secret Service took it off as well. All of that, all of the things you don't hear, obviously, on mainstream media, because they're covering up for this genocidal state that kills its own people. It's a death cult. It's a genocidal death cult. I'm not going to say satanic anymore. I'm telling you, Satan called me again for the 3rd time. Mahmoud, don't use my name with this country. He doesn't want me to attribute his name with Israel because they've surpassed him. They surpassed Satan. Now he's ashamed. Satan is so ashamed of them. He doesn't want to be linked with Israel whatsoever. So a genocidal death cult will take Satan off the equation. In the meantime, at least until I receive further approval from Satan to use his name with them. Maybe when Israel strives for peace, I'll then call them Satan or something, because then they'll reach that level of Satan. Abu Yusuf, thank you so much for your super thanks. Said, وَمَكَرُ وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. Absolutely, my brother. Thank you so much. For those of you who don't know, that verse says, they planned and God plans, and God is the best of planners. Depending on how the translation is, because in Arabic language, you can have several interpretations. Thank you so much for you and for everyone else who sent super thanks as well. And Aini Anwar, thank you so much. Talal Mansour Satan did tawbah after this. Absolutely, he repented. Satan repented. He's depressed now. Dentist guy, Mahmoud, do you believe the Zionist thugs will still go ahead with the Greater Israel Project, the Oded Yinon plan? They were formed as an expansionist state. Look, Ben-Gvir, when he was asked where are the state borders, where are Israel's borders, he was quoted to say, the borders are where the foot of our last soldiers step on. These are our borders. So they are an expansionist state. They are an expansionist, neo-colonialist state. And that was evident. They obviously started up by stealing Palestinian land. Terrorists from Europe with a terrorist ideology, backed by the British government, coming to form a state on the terrorism. From the state, already theft, by the way, but then they didn't stop. They went to the 67 borders, they went to Sinai, and then they went to Lebanon and the Golan. And again, if they didn't face resistance in these areas, they would have continued expanding. But what they proved time after time is that these people only understand the use of force. They didn't retract from Sinai up until they were met with violence, with war. They didn't back away from Lebanon up until they were met with resistance. And they didn't leave Gaza up until they were met with resistance. That's a pattern. proving that we only understand the language of force. There is no diplomacy with us. Don't ask us. Don't have any good faith in us. And don't trust our goodwill, right? There is no goodwill here. So that's what you're seeing. And they definitely are an expansionist state. And the only way they survived is by their enablement by the United States of America primarily. And obviously then the umbrella of legitimacy of those who call themselves the international community, although they're a small extremist minority, a very small and extremist minority. The genocide cartel, US, British government, couple of EU state governments, US administration, obviously, because the people, you need to differentiate between the country and the people, the government and the people, the establishment and the people. The people have said their word, but their countries are not democratic to a level where they listen to the people. So you've had this because they were enabled. Remove the enablement, you remove them. However, clearly, the US, Israel is its state, really, its colony. It will represent something bigger. It will send a bigger message that other people don't want to hear, including in Arab states, by the way. What's that message? Is that people can get what they want if they continue and press on. A right will not be lost so long as there's someone asking for it. And that is a concept that people in power, corrupt people in power do not like. Because if you're a just ruler, you'd love that. Why? Because it's a great expression of the will of the people. Why do you have resistance? It's because you have oppression. Why is there a Hamas? Why is there armed resistance? That is a symptom to a virus called Zionism. That is the antidote to the virus. That's why. Why is there something called resistance? Resistance to what? If you had a normal state, you'd have countries calling itself a political party, calling itself a reform party or a workers' party, like conservative, labor, republic. The resistance for what? For a brutal occupation, for a violent, depraved, supremacist ideology that should not exist and that should be criminalized. Simple. Remove the virus, there's no resistance. How do you remove the virus? Implement equality. It's so simple. It's so bloody simple. I'm not going to use another term. It's so simple. Equality between the Jordan River to the sea. What's the problem with the British government? What's the problem with the US administration? What's the problem with the heads of EU states? What's their problem? Do they believe in the same things that Israel believes in? And they're running countries, right? Clearly, that's the case, isn't it? Show me who your friend is, I'll tell you who you are. If you're their friends and you support them and you back them, then you're them. Simple. Kate, now that we all know that the Gaza pier is just a cover-up, will the 3H Houthis hummus make it fall apart or wait for the sea waves to break it apart? Well, the sea waves clearly took it apart a couple of times. Now that we actually know what it's there for, I already told you before, it's an ambiguous project that I don't trust, and I never trust what the US and Israel does. I never trust them ever. And because clearly you had thousands of trucks waiting on land, and you're creating a pier for what? A pier for what? Order Israel, force them to open the borders and get the aid in. They allowed their own people to burn wheat and flour. Trucks coming from Israel beating the truck drivers. It's a depraved, sick nation beyond anyone's imagination. And if you haven't been there and you haven't seen some of these people, then you don't know, you're delusional. Don't know what the hell you're talking about. And now you have the furthest of the far extreme fascism controlling the state and leading a genocide. And you still have their backers, trying to justify. Still to this day, we saw in the headlines, Reuters, Hamas says 270 killed in attack. Oh, really? Seriously? What else did the Hamas say? Part of the IDF or Israel, it's a fact. Israel, heroic act, okay, we need to have our limits though. See, hospital massacre, flower massacre, Rafah massacre, Nuseirat refugee massacre, every column. And by the way, 2 people is a massacre. 1 blood of an innocent person is a massacre. That's a massacre. And you should be at a stage where these people, if they even imagine of shedding one bloodshed of an innocent Palestinian, they will be threatened with 10 times the retaliation. This is the situation they need to be in. I said it before. Do you think if there was one of these Arab states surrounding Israel telling them, try to level Gaza, will level parts of your country, do you think they would dare to do anything? They wouldn't dare. They're cowards. But they know they're met with backing from people depraved as they are and cowards surrounding them. If they had real people threatening with severe action, they wouldn't have dared. But they're not fazed. But now the resistance is setting a new parameter. They're intimidating Israel. They're moving the battle to Palestine. That's what they're doing. Kate's saying Gazans have a unique accent when they speak Arabic. How could no one suspect the invaders? Because they will speak the accent. They will learn how to speak the accent for a very long time to perfect it and cover up. And they will look like the population. They will wear like the population. They will use the same everything. I have certain groups that are very focused on this. Talal is saying Chinese satellite showed how Eisenhower carrier was hit on Wyon. I saw that image. And I mean, I'm not sure if, I don't know. I wasn't convinced by it, to be fair. Not that I would doubt that they have the capacity to, they definitely do. But I don't know, it looked like it was... unless I'm wrong, again, I could be totally wrong, but and that's why I didn't speak about it, because I don't know, something seemed a little bit off about it. I'm not sure exactly what the sources that published it as well. They targeted it 3 times, obviously. And again, I wouldn't be surprised, but that specific image, I'm not sure about it. Kate is saying, do you see the fall of Saudi due to debt and dumb projects? Well, they're struggling, but with dumb projects, they have an option to stop them. They had previous projects that they stopped. including in the UAE, by the way, not only Saudi Arabia. Many countries do that. They will start off with an ambitious project and then they'll stop it because they don't have enough funding, or they think it's too ambitious, or they'll realize down the line that it's going to cost them way more than what they initially thought. Does that mean they're going to fall? Not necessarily. Look what they faced with the rise of MBS and the inner power struggles and power fights between them. You know, he literally imprisoned so many of the royal family and took so much of their money, put lots of people in prison who were reformists as well. All of that, you know, he has an authoritarian grab on Saudi Arabia. Obviously, things could happen, but again, you know, Saudi Arabia, you're talking about a country. You have many people, obviously, in Saudi Arabia who want reform, who, you know, call for a change. But in Saudi Arabia, also, you have a religious establishment, you know. And when I say religious establishment, you're talking about people who act in the name of religion, not representatives of religion, but you have a religious establishment, religious scholarship in Saudi Arabia, a level part of the religious scholarship, because some of the reformists are in prison, who justify every single thing the government does. And what's better for a government than to have the power, the media, the money, and on the other hand, the religious justification? Stronghold. That's a stronghold. And many people buy into it, into these ideas of this type of scholarship. And obviously they filter, they add what they want through the media and through the scholars to numb the people. And it works with a certain level of people. I don't see a massive revolution happening there, to be honest with you. Because for something to change, you need to have a genuine will by the majority of the people, or a very significant portion of the population, where it will be untenable for the establishment or the government to continue the way it is. Unless you, by some miracle, someone's actually thinking of genuine reform, for example, or doing something good or changing ways and what have you. I don't really see that. I'm not trying to seem pessimistic here, and obviously things can happen, but I'm not seeing that happening in Saudi Arabia, especially with the visual things that he actually changed, where some people are translating it into, oh no, he's actually is pushing for a reform. But then again, on the other hand, you have the authoritarianism and the people in prisons and what have you. There were violent clashes that were diffused by the US in, I think it was in 2017 or 18. Herc Owen, thank you so much for your super thanks. He said MBS arrested bin Talal and put him in jail and took a third of his wealth. Yeah, and others as well. What do you remember? What was it, the Ritz or what hotel? Hundreds of them. Stealing their money, literally. Dentist guy saying, Mahmoud, will the American people accept Netanyahu visiting Washington, D.C. in July? Will there be mass demonstrations or even worse? You need to have mass demonstrations because you're talking about a mass murderer. How can there not be demonstrations against a mass murderer? I'd be ashamed of my country if they accepted this. It's shameful. It's so shameful. Having a person that slaughters people, welcoming him to your country, giving him a state visit, a war criminal. It's like he's convicted, by the way. Israel is a genocidal state confirmed by the ICJ. The man had arrest warrants for war crimes. And the biggest democracy in the world is accepting him. Shows you what kind of democracy you live in. Shows you what kind of garbage morals they push that they even themselves don't believe in. Shows you what type of values they believe in. which are contradictory to the values that they publish, for example, or say that they believe in. All of this is a bunch of hypocrisy and evil to its core. I'm telling you, this town is rotten to its core. Accepting this man. And in Britain, do you know what they did? They started to change laws to allow war criminals to come in and walk without being issued arrest warrants, because you used to have Israeli leaders coming into England, for example, and then an arrest warrant will be issued against them the moment they land by organizations here, which is good. Then the government changed the law. That's how they do it. Hell, what are we talking about? Tony Blair, George Bush, the big genocidal maniacs, they came back to their country as well. Tony Blair was honored with a knighthood by the establishment here. George Bush, well, who followed him? Someone take any action? You'll have protesters against him. A couple of people protesting someone, I don't know, throwing a comment here and there. Apart from that, they're protected. They were promised to be protected after they commit their war crimes, by the way. Ansarullah saying, Mahmoud, do you support the Article 6 campaign? By the way, before I continue, John 11, thank you. And Conscious Hour, thank you for your super thanks very much. And Aini Anwar and Herc Owen, I think I mentioned, and obviously all of the rest, thank you so much for your super thanks. And I got to, Ansarullah saying, if I support the Article 6 campaign to expel the US from the UN. Look, the thing is, what is that gonna change? Yeah, of course I do, number one. Expel any genocidal state from the UN, as far as I'm concerned, okay? But the question is, what's gonna happen after that? What's gonna happen after that? Are we gonna see a different dynamics? Are other countries gonna enforce certain things? And if that's the case, and if one of the biggest superpowers isn't in, will that lead to a bigger conflict or more tensions? What's going to happen? You see, in theory, it's best for people to talk, right? Even if you're on the opposite side. However, the US empire, it doesn't really like talking, by the way. They just like dictating, treating the whole world as their backyard. So I think what's making the difference is the fact that we're heading towards a multipolar world where power is distributed more equally, wealth is distributed more equally around the world and within each country that is a part of the UN. And again, the UN formed after World War II with the power conditions of the time. It was the US, really. They saved Europe at the end of the day and funded them, and there was no competition globally. So the UN is the soft power of the US to reach where it's difficult for the US directly to reach, right? Under the cover of the UN. And because what did we see from the UN? Someone tell me, what did we see from the UN? Justice implemented? All ink on paper. Resolutions respected? Israel never respected resolutions. US vetoed over 40, 50 resolutions for the sake of Israel, half of its vetoes in history. What are we talking about? If UN resolutions were implemented, you've already had a Palestinian state, you would have had a Palestinian right to return, all of that. But it's ink on paper. And what Israel is proving, and what Israel's backers are proving, US, UK, EU backed Israel, what they're proving is that they understand force. Globally, this is the language that they understand. They don't understand reasoning, they don't understand diplomacy. And they don't want diplomacy. It's just a front, they're not genuine. They still have the same arrogant, supremacist, imperial approach towards the world. And Israel is the ultimate representation of that. It's the vicious, brutal, but true representation of this barbaric type of imperialism that kills people and chews people to death for the sake of power and geopolitical power and money. It's a very dark and ugly truth, by the way. Very dark, very ugly truth. Very dystopian, but very real. Conscious Hour is asking me, where can I send info offline? My email. You'll see it on my channel description. Ahmed Habib is saying US expelled from the UN. They need to be expelled from planet Earth. And their B-son Israel with them. Listen, things are changing. Things are changing, and it's going to take time. And it doesn't look like it's going to end nice. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I want to call it a concern even, because after what we've seen in the past 8 months, like nothing's a concern. It's like, what else can happen? What, a nuclear bomb? Okay, fine. That's it. Well, after the images that we've seen, the past 8 months, I haven't seen that in my life. I haven't heard of it before, in history even. The torture methods of evil, the viciousness, the depravity, the sickness. We might see far, far worse things soon. And Israel, backed by the United States administration and the British government and NATO states, governments and powers, they are the ones leading us there. Look at what they're doing with Russia. Look, they're enabling the puppet Zelensky to bomb nuclear radar detectors. What, are you out of your mind? Are you a lunatic? Poking the bear? What are you doing? And supporting this man, although you know what he's up to, supporting him, covering up against what? Against people? So we could be seeing, it could be paving the way to a nuclear war that will end at least half of humanity, if not like a 3/4 of humanity. And I'm really not trying to be dramatic or anything. But if people have the capacity to do that, then what other capacity do they have? They'll be like, might as well, let's end half of the world's population, or 3/4. Let's have less population to control and worry about. They could be thinking down these lines, by the way. I wouldn't be surprised. Gullyberg is asking me, do you see any neighboring country leader going against Netanyahu in the coming days? What official leader? They're all cowards. Who? The Jordanian foreign minister? Assisi? Who's going to go up against him? No one. The only people who have been going up against Israel are the resistance movements. The last war, army to army, is Egypt. They took back their lands. That was the Camp David. They overestimated or underestimated Israel. After that, think about it. Who liberated Lebanon? Hezbollah and the resistance. Who liberated Gaza? Palestinian resistance. Who will liberate Palestine? The resistance movements are going to liberate the Palestine, led by the Palestinian resistance. They're going to liberate all of it. And history will write that, by the way. History will write that. It'll be taught in history books and everything you want is in military academies, whatever. And then the people who supported Israel will act like they didn't support it, and they're speaking up, oh, I saw this coming and what have you. It's just a matter of time. Maybe Lynn reports that a small arms exchange in Kiryat Shmoni, unknown what the source of gunfire is. Well, Hezbollah's setting all of the north alight. They set up a base alight the other day. They're blinding Israel by targeting the Iron Dome, batteries, radars, teams, everything. They're introducing new weapons every day. And they moved the battle to Israel. Traditionally, the battle, like I said, Israel fights in enemy territory. Lightning strikes, get it over and done with by their coward airstrikes, and then withdraw. Now, they outsmarted them. They perfected their targetings against Israeli military bases. They know what they're doing. They know where Israeli forces are before they establish the base. It's as if they have someone within Israel working for them, or that they are monitoring every single system in Israel under the sun. And what is Israel going to do? Go and start massacres in Lebanon? The other day we had an official in Israel saying if we go in all-out war with Lebanon, we won't survive 24 hours. If Gaza expelled over 3 million Israelis, Gaza, if Gaza managed to expel millions of Israelis who no longer believe in that state, what do you think Hezbollah will do? They already did it to a very large extent, like over 100,000 off the north, and you can argue that because they are attacking, that contributed to many people fleeing Israel as well. That's an argument, valid one. But Hezbollah and all out, and so far they're like using between 4 to 6% of their power. 4 to 6, apparently estimates are Hezbollah is using 5%. If Hezbollah is using 5% now, what's 20%? What is 20%? What's going to happen? It's what doesn't have an answer. It's a paper tiger. It's a failed army. It's a failed state. They're only surviving by the help of the US in arms, mainly, right? Legitimacy, it extends to other countries too. Take the US out, there's no Israel. But they're supporting them. Donna Vorche, thank you for the virus and cure analogy. It's a good one. Thank you, no problem. I always said that. It's a symptom. Resistance is a symptom to a virus. You have a virus. To get rid of the virus, you go to a good doctor. You have a problem, whatever the problem is. Will he look at the symptom? Oh, only the symptom and try and take away the symptom? No, if there's cancer, they'll take the cancer out. Eliminate the cancer, or try to, right? You have a root problem, you go to a dentist. Well, will he put a crown on top of a rotten tooth, or remove the rotten tooth before, or root, whatever? They'll take it from the root. But they'll go miles and miles to justify this ideology. The Badger, thank you so much, brother. And everyone else for your comments. Lily M is saying, I have a Facebook friend who always attack my posts. Please talk about Hezbollah and their attacks in northern Israel. They just taking advantage of the current situation to aid Hamas. Hezbollah is showing their traditional and true position, which is solidarity with the oppressed Palestinian people, regardless of the results and the repercussions. Like Iran. Before Hamas, before any of these people act out of principle. I know it's difficult for depraved and immoral people to understand that across the world. It's very difficult for them because they have no morals, no nothing. It's difficult, but some people on earth, they have moral principles, like the Yemenis, for example, as well. Millions every Friday support Palestine, and their governments are more democratic than all of Europe and the US combined. Why? Because they follow what the people say. People will march in their millions in Western capitals from the river to the sea, free Palestine and the genocide. This, shame on you. No one's listening. In Yemen, they listen and they represent their people by taking legit action against a genocidal state. That's democracy. Go and learn democracy from Ansarullah in Yemen. Lessons in democracy. People representing the people. People in power. So these people act out of principle. Sacrificing and risking in the process. What do you think Iran doesn't risk and sacrifice? How many times were they offered that we'll lift the sanctions and we'll do this and we'll do that only if you stop this? And similar with Hamas. Just take off your arms and we'll recognize you and we can have this and that. And then they knew we lift our arms. It's Israel, go ahead, do whatever it wishes. And from Iran's perspective, they know who they're dealing with. The US. The country that committed mass genocides across the world. What are we talking about? And as if they're nothing. That's the thing, though. They act as if it's nothing. Oh, we went to war here and there. And a couple of million killed. It's nothing. That's how they view it. Why? Because these people don't have morals. They're not talking about people who view humans beings as equal. That's why I support Israel. But what Hezbollah is doing has been exceptionally effective. You know what? I'll tell you one thing. It's been close to the effectiveness of the Palestinian resistance. Obviously, Hamas started this. No denying. Hamas conducted the 7th of October with the prisoners in mind, with the oppressed people of the West Bank in mind, and they immediately told Israel, we're willing to negotiate. We tried to negotiate with you for 10 years. We have prisoners dying in prison. We're willing to negotiate now. Israel obviously used it to commit a genocide and a plan that they already had. Hezbollah couldn't sit silent. Simple. Because in previous escalations as well, Hamas was participating in 2006. Although there was another kidnapped soldier in Gaza around that time. Both Hamas and Hezbollah kidnapped Israeli soldiers in similar times, something that looked coordinated at the time. But I remember in 2006, they still had attacks in Gaza too. Hezbollah also they bombed the border, bombed the Hummer. They took them down as bodies, by the way, and they didn't tell Israelis. And then they had the prisoner swap. And the Israeli side only knew in the last second that they were dead. They were so tough with negotiations. And with Hamas, when they kidnapped Gilad Shalit, they had one fighter literally bombing a tank, opening the tank, carrying him out on his back, running a couple of 100 meters and taking him down a tunnel and disappearing. And then there was a link somewhere. So traditionally, that link has been ongoing, obviously, and Hezbollah act out of principles. They know their enemy. They faced them. They were occupied by them. They committed massacres. Qana massacre. Read about the massacres in Lebanon, in case someone doesn't know history. Right? Go and read about the Israeli massacres in Lebanon. And how many people, innocent people, they killed and slaughtered. And that's been effective. And that's changing the equation, by the way, and setting new parameters. Okay. Cupcake L is saying, I'll finish it with that. NATO seems to be pushing for war with Russia. How would that impact the Israel-Gaza war, in your opinion? They have been pushing Russia for a very long time. I am not entirely sure they want an all-out war. I think they are still testing the waters with certain approvals that they're giving to their little puppet Zelensky and him poking the Russian bear, and see how far Russia can handle. It's reckless. Doing that is reckless with a nuclear power. It's an extremely reckless thing. But then again, the Russian side has been very conservative in their response and their current hostility they're facing from the NATO. Not from the US. What's the NATO? What's Europe? EU is the US poodle. What are we talking about? So they're poking the bear to test how far we can go. Russia knows that. And they're also clever in how they respond, where they show that, we're not going to go all out, but there will be repercussions, etc. Like they had some intense attacks in Ukraine in the past couple of days after they attacked the military, the radar detectors for the nuclear weapons. And it's quite stupid. It shows you how reckless these governments are. And they're justifying all of that by how? By generating the artificially generated, obviously, sympathy for Ukraine. Artificially generated, as if anything is real. Do you think they care about human rights or people under occupation? They're standing against people under occupation in Gaza. What are we talking about? Whenever you hear these people in power talk to you about Ukraine, reflect and talk about what's happening in Palestine and obviously other parts of the world. But now it's evident because they're both very, very intense, right? What's your position? And why are you supporting them there? It's because you're a benefit. Like they supported the Mujahideen in the 80s. They supported the Mujahideen, not for the cause of jihad, right? But they supported the Mujahideen in the 80s, in the late 70s. Why? Because they were fighting the Soviets. So the US National Security Advisor was there, Zbigniew Brzezinski. He even went to meet with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. And he has a famous video of him standing with them, telling them, God is on your side. You're fighting a noble cause. You need to go there and get your mosques back and your houses back. God is with you. Wow. And then things changed after the collapse. So anyone who observes this knows these people by now and how fake they are. And they only think about their interests, regardless of anyone, regardless of any human being, starting from their own population. They'll risk your lives. They'll commit false flag and kill thousands of you. They'll send you to unnecessary wars to die for nothing and go back with PTSD for life and die or commit suicide. How many US veterans commit suicide every day? Could someone tell me? 22. That was the last statistics that I read. Epidemics. For what? For liberty? For democracy? For human rights? Or for the big pockets? Herc Owen, thank you so much for your super thanks. Saying they still mad at Russia for saving Syria. That's when they intervened, why they intervened in Ukraine. And obviously they had their reasons in Ukraine. Look, but that's the thing, it's a pattern. It's a pattern. It's not like it started and ended with Ukraine. They had a pattern of expanding east. When they went against their agreements they had with Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. Why did they do that? And we'll wrap it up there. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It was nice being with you. I published a couple of other videos, by the way, that are very important, so go ahead and watch them. They're quite short, but they're very important with the details. We haven't spoken about everything in this video. If you don't get the notifications, make sure you visit the relevant tabs on my channel, live videos, community tab. Also, I post regularly on the community tab. And make sure to follow me on Rumble and X as well. Links are also in the description. Sometimes I post things that I don't post on YouTube just because of restrictions. Apart from that, thank you so much for joining me as usual. Thank you to all of our regular, really, so some people are so dedicated. It's unbelievable how dedicated you are. Thank you so much. I see you every single day. Molly, Violet, Kirk, everyone, thank you so much for joining in. Sorry if I missed some of the comments, by the way. You know, it's impossible almost to follow all of the comments, especially because YouTube keeps dragging the comments up, so apologies for that, but I'm here regularly anyway. Special thanks to everyone who sent super thanks, and welcome to Conscious Hour. Thank you for your membership. A special thanks to Daniela, Windy, Faraz, Conscious, Mariam, Conscious again, thank you so much. Gulnara, Vivette, Manuel, Faraz, Abu Yusuf, Aini, Herc, John, Conscious, thank you so much. Herc and Herc, thank you very much for your super thanks. I really appreciate them. Apart from that, enjoy your week ahead, and I will hopefully see you soon in the next video. Good night, everyone, and peace be on all of you, and take care. Salam.